Mario Kart 64 was the second highest selling game on the Nintendo 64 console with just under 10 million copies sold. With so many copies distributed and many millions of hours spent around the world playing couch co-op, one has to wonder what was changed over the course of its development. Just a quick note about today's video. We will be breaking this down into 4 sections: characters, items, cut features, and maps. This video is a compilation of a variety of different sources. All will be linked in the video description. Without further ado, let's get into the video. Mario Kart 64 was originally shown to the public during the Shoshinkai Software exhibition in 1995 in Japan. Let's discuss what we can see from this footage. Those with keen eyes will be able to notice an unusual racer in the background. That's actually Kamek, the Magic Koopa. We can pull up some early character select screens to confirm this. Firstly, we can see that the character select screen art was vastly improved in the final version of the game, looking a lot more fresh and way less terrifying. I mean, just take a look at Toad's face. Secondly, we can see that Donkey Kong was not even in the game yet. In his place was Kamek, the Magic Koopa, who was very popular at the time due to being one of the main villains in the widely successful Super Mario World 2, Yoshi's Island. Kamek wasn't just seen in the character select screen, as we have recorded footage of him being spotted in-game as a playable character in the demo. One has to wonder what Kamek's weight class would be, and what was the reason he was cut. Some people argue that Kamek would not have made sense to have been a heavy character, and that Nintendo wanted to ensure there was 3 heavy characters available. Other arguments point towards Kamek being a placeholder character, while Nintendo waited for Rare to send over the 3D assets for Donkey Kong. This, however, seems very suspicious, because it's unlikely in 1995 you would want to build out a fully rendered 3D character that is both in-game and playable, just for the sake of being a placeholder. This is further proven to be an unlikely theory as an interview in 1996 with Tomoki Kurum, who was MK64's character designer. He said, "Mario was the character I struggled with the most. We had CG for Mario from Mario 64, but this time he needed to be riding a cart, so I had to change his model a bit. To create a standing model of Mario, you can get by with a 3-dimensional model drawn on paper, but once I tried to take that model and sit him down in a cart, and make his body turn with the cart, and make him grasp the wheel, etc., those animations proved exceedingly difficult and all these weird inconsistencies started popping up. I pretty much had to take each body part, hips, feet, knees, etc., and work on them one by one. It was a lot of trial and error." He follows up discussing the animation issues with rendering speeds back in 1994. "We had to create a ton of animation too. Since you basically can view the carts from any angle, that meant creating animation for every perspective, and I'm talking thousands, or maybe even tens of thousands of different animations. Creating and then rendering the animation was a very time-consuming process. Then we had to hand it off to the programmers, who would implement it in the actual game. Then we'd have to recheck it again ourselves, submit, check, revise, submit, check, revise. It was really a lot of tedious work." With this additional information, it's very strange to see a character like Kamek being cut from the final version of the game, given how much work must have already gone into the character. However, in the credits of the game you can see the following under the special thanks section: Donkey Kong 3D model provided courtesy of Rare UK. So it is true that Rare sent over the files for the character. What's likely to have happened is that at the final stretch of development, Kamek was cut. We know this because he was in the late playable demos of the game. They wanted to make space for a more iconic character, and the idea for Donkey Kong came up. The game is programmed to have 8 racers total, so it wouldn't make sense to keep Kamek in as a rotatable 9th slot. He was the weakest character out of the lineup, thus first on the chopping board to make space. Now let's talk about items. What we can observe from the early demo footage is that the item boxes used to be a much more jarring black color. I'm very thankful this was changed in the final version, as it doesn't really match the other colors that we commonly see in the Mario Kart tracks. On early advertisements for the game, we can spot the cape feather. The cape feather made its debut in the Mario Kart series and Super Mario Kart for the SNES system as an item you could obtain through item boxes. The feather granted the user the ability to jump twice as high as you regularly could, granting you access to early shortcuts by being able to jump past blockades and barriers in certain maps. Some other items were discovered in an asset leak in 2020. A Yoshi egg item. This originally existed in Super Mario Kart, however it was not attainable by the player. Only CPU-controlled Yoshis could access this item, and it functioned like a regular shell. It was a very strange thing to add to the game, but made racing against Yoshi unique. Later, Yoshi's egg popped up as a usable item in Mario Kart Double Dash on GameCube. 6 strange circular items, possibly different colored Yoshi eggs, were discovered in the files. It's difficult to speculate what these could have possibly been. There's no clear code info either. The final item that was found was a 10-ton weight. For me, I like to imagine this being an item that increases the gravity of players, making them unable to jump. This would be incredibly overpowered in certain maps like Wario Stadium, where you need solid airtime to be able to jump the gaps. However, some code was discovered inside the game's files that references this item. It shows that 11 star sprites and a bubble sprite would spawn next to the player. These were clearly placeholders for some sort of functionality that was eventually scrapped. Possibly some sort of anchoring scenario, where the player was locked into place with a chain. Let's talk about some of the features that were cut from the game. According to an interview in 1996 with Hideki Kano, the game's director, originally we had a no-item racing mode too. It was our attempt to appeal to F-Zero fans who feel that items are a distraction to the racing. Allowing for serious races where you're trying to edge someone out for fractions of a second, with all the racers clumped close together in the final lap. As it turned out, however, almost everyone who demoed Mario Kart 64 chose not to play that mode, and we ultimately dropped it. In a traditional racing game, you would of course include a mode like that, but Mario Kart without items somehow felt kind of cheap. So we cut it out. I guess that for people who just want to race, there's always the time attack mode. So we can definitely confirm that some modes were dropped from the final version of the game. But were any maps left behind? In that very same interview, Tadashi Sugiyama, the game's visual director, says, "There were a number of courses we had to drop too. One was a big multi-story parking garage-like structure, which you'd race around and around as you ascended it. At first, we thought it would be a nice realistic track, and that it would be really fun, but when people actually played it, the constant turning made them feel sick. We also made a big city track, with a castle and a nice pond, where you got to race around all these different houses and buildings. Unfortunately, it was a very large map, and it took too much time to race through. So we cut it." Inside the leaked asset files, we can see remnants of the multi-story parking garage level. You can see the different floor indicator icons. It looks like there were 4 floors intended for this structure. Unfortunately, no actual leaked images of early development for this course exist today, or at least they have yet to surface. The same can't be said for the other map Tadashi describes. We have plenty of leaked information about the infamous cut map named Town. What's great about these screenshots are, they were eventually recreated into this stunning map walkthrough by YouTuber Micro500. These are cut maps, but other maps underwent some final touches. Banshee's Boardwalk used to have wooden guardrails everywhere. This is different from the final version where you constantly fall off to your doom. In Yoshi's Valley, the giant egg was slightly elevated. From the screenshots, it's difficult to determine if the egg would have moved around like it did in the final version of the game, or remained stationary. Mario Raceway had some tweaks with its background hills, but nothing additional was done to the course itself that impacted gameplay. With the leaked assets, we are able to see the old mini-maps. From these we can determine some changes that some of the courses underwent during development. Bowser's Castle, a map which looked previously a lot more simple than the final version of the game. You can see the final portion of the race has been substantially altered, with the thrilling jump section at the back portion likely being added much later on. We also know that Bowser's Castle originally had 4 thwomps at one point, whereas the final game had 1 to 3 depending on what speed setting you selected. Koopa Troopa Beach was originally coded to have a shark, but it's unknown how this would have functioned in-game. A texture was discovered along with code that shows that when a player approaches a certain part of the course, a maximum of 4 shark objects could appear. We don't know much more than that, but it's interesting to think about. The biggest rework was Royal Raceway. This doesn't even look recognizable as the same map. There was no jump section previously, the map was a lot smaller and a lot more straightforward. Interesting for us to be able to peek into the developers' minds and see what maps they weren't satisfied with. Royal Raceway ended up being an iconic map for the game as well as the map used for the trophy celebration, so it's pretty fortunate that it got an overhaul. What's interesting is some of the billboards were changed to Koopa Air from Goodyear, which was clearly a play on the Goodyear brand, as well as this shell logo which clearly references the large oil company. These were almost certainly swapped to avoid any sort of copyright infringements. Overall, without any further leaks, this is likely the only insight we will have into what the game used to look like. I'm still sad that Kamek is yet to be a mainline Mario Kart character. He was again found in the code for Mario Kart 8, so it looks like the poor guy got cut twice. I'd like to see him as an available racer, just for nostalgia's sake. Let me know if there's anything I missed. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you like the content. New videos are uploaded every day.